Hi, everyone, and welcome to this week's edition of CU's You Should Know. I am joined by Tom Ruggia, the CEO of Samsara Vision.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for coming in. I'm excited to jump into it to tell our listeners a little bit about yourself, about the company, and about your journey. So, why don't we kick it off and really talk about what led you to becoming CEO?
Sure, yeah. In my early career after college, I actually was focused on patient care and physical therapy was my focus and what I wanted my career to be. I got kind of turned around, took a gap year to do medical sales, pharmaceutical sales, my first couple of years.
Nice.
And the intention was to earn enough money to pay for physical therapy school, but fell in love with the vision business and spent 15 years at a company called Alcon, where I learned the business and always in the eye. My whole career, I've always been focused on vision and ophthalmology, and then spent 5 years at Johnson and Johnson. During that time, I got exposed to many different conditions of the eye, but I'd always listened in to the surgeons talk about non-preventable blindness. So patients that live today with blindness that they considered in the surgeon and physician community as non-preventable. And I always had in the back of my mind that we all should be focused on creating innovations that treat diseases for people with handicaps which are considered non-preventable. And I saw this technology one day, while I was with Johnson and Johnson, was introduced to it and learned about the vision improvement in this condition, and saw it as an opportunity to build a company around this idea. And when I got the opportunity from investors, I took it and ran with it. And that was 4 years ago, and we've been doing good work ever since.
That's awesome. What an amazing technology and life changing for so many individuals, right?
Absolutely, absolutely.
That's awesome. So since becoming CEO, what have been some of the key priorities and focus areas for the company?
Yeah, I think CEO is an odd term. It's I think means a lot of different things. I think people think of CEOs as sort of penthouse people,
Yep.
and that's definitely not the case for a business that's just starting out. So when I took over this, it was really maybe even a lump of clay to be molded into something special. And I had spent 20 years in bigger companies learning what good looks like. And then so on day one, you say, okay, I'm going to take 100 days or so to build a blueprint to what success would look like in this company. And, then you get on the journey. And for us, it was to, early rebrand the company so people could connect with the brand and feel comfortable with the brand, which starts with naming, but also goes through things like color conventions and all of that on a shoestring budget. So a lot driven by yours truly. And, we did that early on and built something people could connect with. And then from there, it's where do you want to go? It's how do we launch this product where patients are? And my goal from day one was, we're not going to focus on the United States because we live here. We're going to find the patients where they live and then develop regulatory strategies to get approval and reimbursement in every country around the world. So in medical technology, I think being a CEO means you have to understand each government you want to go to and how to get products approved in every country and what makes sense. And then working with investors to put together a plan to sort of pay for the vision. And then the company can become, profitable over time and attractive to suitors. And, but the key is we have to be doing good for the patients. And for us at Samsara Vision, the patient is always in the center of everything we do. And, if you keep that ethos and patients always come first, everything else follows along.
It's a great mindset to have. We talked early on about your career journey, right? Spending some time at Johnson and Johnson, medical device sales. What were some of the lessons you learned in those previous roles that really enabled you to have an impactful role as a CEO?
Well, yeah, this is a great question. I think when I joined, the first company I joined, I mentioned was Alcon, who's the world leader in ophthalmology. But the time when I joined, they were still a growing company. So maybe a few $1 billion in sales, but they were growing at 8 to 10% per year and adding people. And they were kind of noted for treating people well. And so joining as a young person there was great because the growth trajectory, the positions that became available, you could do things, you can get promoted quickly. As a young person, you could take on responsibilities that, maybe in another company, a bigger company, you wouldn't get as a young person. So I was exposed to director level positions, manager level positions, international positions very early. And I think one of the keys to my career is when I was offered something, the bigger the challenge, the more likely I was to saying yes. And a little bit of a not being afraid to fail. Hopefully that wouldn't lead to something
Yeah.
catastrophic. But yeah, I've been given opportunities like preventing a price cut in South Korea for the company I worked for, and we had an ERP disaster where we couldn't ship. I took over the warehouse and helped the company get through that. And so things that were not in my sort of ballywick, I always said yes and took. And over time, the more I was exposed to, the more things I was involved with, the more outside of sales and marketing I kind of looked. That prepared me to be a CEO. So sitting in my desk today, if anything comes up in any aspect of our business, I've likely either seen someone else go through it or fix it, or I've been directly involved in going through it and fixing it. And so I think that's helped me become who I am today. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. All those real life experiences kind of like gave you that background to be able to be the role you are now.
So the mantra was say yes and go.
That's great. That's a great
don't
mantra
think
to
about it
have.
too much. Overthinkers Anonymous. The meeting starts tomorrow, kind of thing. No, we never did that. It was always let's say yes and figure it out. And my family came along, so we started our family in New Jersey with my sales role, but we lived in Chicago and Texas and Toronto and traveled the world. I've traveled the world for business.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's just been exposed to so much.
Now back in New Jersey.
Now back 10 years back here. Yeah,
That's awesome. So tell us a little bit about the insights on the product development side, right? Like it's an amazing technology. Personally, I've never even heard about it since we started the conversation. I think it impacts so many people's lives in a really positive way. So what goes into the product development side, and how do you really balance that with the market's needs for that technology?
Sure, yeah. We've started with the patient. So our patients are age-related macular degeneration patients who are in the late stage of the disease. So these are patients who have lost a lot of vision because of the condition. So we asked the question early on, the company asked the question, how do we bring vision back to these patients? And so if you we developed a true Galilean telescope, miniaturized for implantation into the eye.
Wow.
And then so the telescope itself works. So it magnifies light 2.7 times, and that light magnified to the back of the eye changes the centration of the image, and then people with a macular scar, which is in the dead center of your vision. So if I had macular degeneration and I was looking at you, I would not be able to see your face, but I would have peripheral vision, so I'd know what's going on, but I wouldn't be able to determine who I was looking at or what they were saying or what their face was doing. And what we've done is develop this telescopic approach where we magnify the light 2.7 times. We use photoreceptors in the back of the eye that are still working, and the patient can see again. So if the patient was, let's say, 2160, so if you'd imagine a vision chart, the big E on the top of the vision chart would be about what our patients could make out, but they couldn't go even one line deeper.
Wow.
The telescope can bring them 4 lines better, 3 to 4 lines better on that eye chart, and they can read much deeper. And that brings a lot of function back to the patients, and we've demonstrated that in clinical trials where patients can read twice as fast, the reading acuity is twice as good, and that vision is 4 lines, 3 to 4 lines better. So we knew we had something with the optic. The question was, how do we make it so that it can be done in a surgery that was manageable? So we miniaturized the optic, which is the telescope, but then we have a design that can be fit into an injector system. And during cataract surgery, the device gets injected right into a place where a normal intraocular lens would be placed during cataract surgery. So our surgeons are very used to doing that type procedure, and they just have to modify their technique slightly because it's a larger device, but not so much larger that it's a different procedure. It's very similar to what they're doing today. And then we train the surgeons on this. We have a whole team, about 30 people around the world do this kind of training with the surgeons and the staff and the patients. And then we train the surgeons. We're there for the day of surgery. And then we train them on how to do the rehab post-operatively to get the patients back up and using their new vision. It's a really fun process and
Yeah.
Easy to do. For us, we've got great systems, and we've developed good process for this.
That's awesome. It's life-changing, I'm sure, for all those patients.
That's my favorite part. So getting to be I was talking earlier, we've had 350 cases with the new device.
Wow.
And I've probably been in 40 to 50 of them around the world. And we just had one in China. I wasn't able to get to our first China case, but I've been in cases in Europe and in the United States. And Yeah, my favorite part is when I'm able to, when it's allowed and the patient's signed off, to be able to meet the patient post-operatively and see the tears and see them see faces again, and that just makes life different.
Yeah,
It's great.
that makes it all worth
Yeah,
it. That
yeah.
must be super rewarding. Well, it sounds like collaboration is a part of your success, right? We talked about obviously your internal team, the patients, the researchers, the healthcare providers. How does collaboration really be a fabric of the company?
Absolutely, that's great. So over my career, 20 years, I've met so many people in the ophthalmic industry. Our little industry, it really is a family, and it sounds. We go to conferences and everybody knows each other. And what I love about it is that collaborative spirit is alive and well. And when you make all these connections over a 20-year time period, when you have a problem, you sit and look at the problem. And in my mind, first goes to who's solved this before or who's come closest to solving this before. Who can I text or call to get some advice on this? And we've had partners in Europe on things like reimbursement. So when we get the device approved and we're marketing in Europe, the next question is how will we get payers to
Hmm.
pay for the device? So we have a number of connections that are working on that today, and we've gotten reimbursement in Germany. We're working on France, UK, Spain, Italy, and you go side by side. But I know people who have done it, so you call them and say
Yeah,
who the partners you've used, and you build the plan and go from there, and you get it right. Like so, you also ask them, what would you have done differently when you were successful? How would you have sped it up? And you get all that advice over time. Same in the United States. We're in clinical trial in the U.S. today. The device is not approved in the U.S., but we're doing investigational procedures in a trial called the Concerto trial. And for those, we're using clinical sites, 14 clinical sites around the U.S.
wow.
And so those sites were selected, again, by reputation and former knowledge of these successful sites. We picked a research partner that I had experience with in my career. And so I said earlier, we have 30 people working in the field. We probably have about 40 people in the company, but I would think our ecosystem is more like 200 people who have worked,
That's
are
awesome.
working now or have worked with us over time in my 4 years at the company.
That's great. It's just a true testament to your relationships and your network and your reputation too.
Yeah, there's so much value in that. And you
100%.
pay it back. I get calls from CEOs that are starting out that might be a little bit behind us, and they ask, "Well, how did you do this, that, or the other?" And I'm happy to spend time and help. And so you pay it forward, and you pay it, you pay it back too.
100%. That's great advice on external collaboration, right? Let's talk a little bit internally, right? Obviously, you have an amazing team that you put in place. I'm sure on a daily basis, they're driving innovation. They're trying to hit all these different milestones to come. What qualities do you look for in your team when you're trying to really assemble the right players?
Yeah, it's an easy question for me. It's all about the patient, and so people who are 24/7 kind of people, but with the patient in the center. Those are the people that we want around in the company, and that's who I'm looking for. So a couple of examples: our lead in Europe, I have known for 15 years. Great process orientation, but also same passion for delivering care in the operating room. Jason Herod. And Dr. Rebecca Kammer in the United States. She's a low vision optometrist by training, and she's been in academia and private practice, but her passion is low vision for elderly patients. And you can see that come through in how she's working on the U.S. clinical trial. I know a number of people around the world, Valentina Carbone in Italy, who's a younger professional up and coming. This is her first managerial job, and she just flew to China to train the staff in our first China case and was
Wow.
excellent. And she's been all over Europe and China now too. So it's great to see young people accelerating in their careers, getting opportunities they wouldn't have gotten maybe somewhere else, and developing into young professionals. But I've mentioned a few, and I know if my team were here, I'd get a bunch of stuff for not mentioning everybody. But yeah, it's the first things first is you have to have a passion for patients. And if you don't, probably Samsara is probably not the right place. But if you do, and you get emotional seeing people see again,
Yep.
then send us a resume. We'd love to talk to you.
That's awesome. You touched on this a little bit, right? Like the role of your team is really to help educate people about the company. What role do advocacy and education play in the rising of awareness of really the importance of vision and the work you guys are doing?
Yeah, and big. I'll use the biggest challenge that we have is many of our patients are what's called lost to follow, which is nice medical term for hopeless. They went home because they were told there's nothing that they can do, and they go home and they're resigned themselves. So this is the rest of my life. This 10 by 10 room is the only place I'll ever see again, and that's terrible, right?
Yeah.
But they don't receive the message. They don't. So for us, it's getting into our sites, convincing our sites that this is a good product, having the first 2 screenings where the patient uses a practice device, having that aha moment for the patient that translates into surgeon passion. Then we ask the surgeons to help to review their previous charts. So, who left your practice 10 years ago that may be a candidate that we can call back and get into the office. So that kind of advocacy takes time to build. But once the surgeon or the staff see that patient see again, then they get that magic, and then we open it up to the lists. But some patients we've had haven't seen a doctor in 10 years and come back in, and
That's wild.
they're excited
They
by
thought
this
there was no
idea.
other options, right?
Yeah, and it's expensive for us as a company. We limited budget because we're early stage, and so to get the word out to patients who may have given up, or more so than the patients, their loved ones. So everybody has a loved one that is as elderly,
Yep.
that may have given up on care because there's nothing else they can do. So keeping your eye out for technologies that might be of benefit, and then alerting your loved ones to this being available is something we're trying to do, in many different ways, whether it be radio or internet or social media. Getting connected to the caregivers is something that we're passionate about.
That's awesome. I have to ask, I'm sure there's hundreds of different examples, but is there any moments that really stand out as really rewarding experiences in this role?
Oh, that's such a great question. There's so many. Some of our first cases in Europe were great. A couple of things for me as a business person. I went to a meeting we had recently in I'm blanking on where I was in the world. But we had a meeting in Europe where everybody flew in and had a meeting. But it was 30 people or so, and I didn't say a word for the whole meeting. So as a new company, the CEO has to do so much to set the building blocks. But this was the first real meeting where I walked in and the Samsara Vision signs were in the hotel meeting room, and I could walk up the stairs and walk into a meeting that was already underway, and people were doing the business of Samsara without me driving it. Oh gosh, I got really choked up watching that.
That's awesome.
And these young up and coming people working so hard to make this company a success. And that was really emotional. I took some pictures and sent it to my kids and said,
That's awesome.
Look at this. And so I don't
Congrats.
think they think it's as cool as I do.
Now you're laying
and
that
then our
legacy foundation there, so that's awesome.
our procedure in China, we've been working with a partner on this for a year, and for that to happen, that's I think a huge accomplishment for the company. And so that was a couple of weeks ago. It's real winner for us. And when we did our first cases in the United States clinical trial, we had a surgeon in Florida, Dr. Mark Levy, who had been a part of this technology in a previous iteration when it was a very challenging surgery. And his first surgical procedure, he kind of reacted like, wow, this was a lot easier than what we had done before. And, that kind of response from the surgeon was a nice little reward to
Reassuring.
Yeah.
So for any aspiring CEOs or entrepreneurs that are listening, what advice would you give them?
I guess get the experiences that are going to be necessary before you take the helm. Don't be afraid to fail. But when you're with a company, if you're very, very young and you're choosing your first company or second company, the allure of the big names can be, attractive. And you might, if you join a company that's too big, the challenge that you're going to have as a young person is how do you get exposed to a wide enough set of circumstances? The big companies want you to do your job really well and don't open your eyes to everything else around you. But if you get into a growing company that might be a little smaller, you're going to get exposed to a lot of different stuff that's not in your area of focus, but the company needs your help because they need extra hands. And when you get a vantage point from the C-suite or a vantage point from a VP's point of view, and you see what their world is like, you can take mental notes and learn things that you wouldn't get if. So I guess my big advice was have exposure to everything possible, collect those mental notes and those experiences, and then when you take the helm as a CEO, apply those things on a day-to-day basis. I guess the other thing I would say as a lifelong athlete, if you want to be a successful entrepreneur, CEO, business leader, someone in charge, you really have to have a biopsychosocial approach to your job. So I'm a person who wakes up very, very early. I get a couple hours of working out in before I hit the office. And I often hit the office at like a noontime pace where the first few hours I'm attacking problems that it might take people until 1 or 2 in the afternoon to get to. But for me, I've already been up for so long that I hit
Yep.
it at a noontime pace. And, so having that as your center and then minimizing the distractions at night, whether it be TV or alcohol or whatever else it might be, minimize that, get to bed early, get a good night's sleep, and get up in the morning and work out. I know that sounds like somebody saying, take your, say your prayers, take your vitamins or whatever Hulk Hogan
No,
used
it's
to say.
good advice.
But it is the cornerstone of a lot of successful people. And it's been a driver for me throughout my career.
That's awesome. Great advice. So looking ahead, what's next? What are some milestones, some goals you have on the horizon?
Sure. Yeah, we are just on the cusp of increasing our revenue. We're recruiting patients and doing patients in our clinical trial. And I think for me, when we get to the midpoint of that clinical trial, that will be a milestone for the company that's celebratable. And when we get to our $1, $2, $3, $5 million in revenue in Europe, another milestone for us to celebrate. We also have a number of R&D projects for patients who have had a previous cataract surgery, and that's limited them to this our technology. We're working on solutions for them to change out the lens that they've had for a new lens that we manufacture. So I think when I see that first patient treated that has had a lens exchange, I think that's a big moment for us as well. So those are some milestones on the company.
That's
side.
awesome.
Yeah.
Well, good luck. Good luck with that.
Thank you.
For anyone that's listening or tuning in that might benefit from obviously contacting you guys or have a loved one that could, how can they find out about Samsara Vision?
www.samsaravision.com, easiest way to find us. LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram as well. Samsara Vision, SAMSARA Vision is the company's name. The name comes from Sanskrit. It means rebirth or regrowth in Sanskrit. So it's a nod to our patient journey, our patients who have moved into the blind world, and then we're bringing them back and rebirthing them into the seeing world again is the concept.
Very fitting name.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, Tom, thank you so much for coming in. Thank you so much for sharing your journey, a little bit more about the company. It was definitely inspiring, and I'm glad our listeners had the chance to,
Thank you, Steve.
listen.
Appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Thank you guys for tuning in, and stay tuned for next week's edition of CEOs You Should Know.